Dismissing me as a mere formality, she said, "We don't need old men like you dragging us down," and flipped her hair. My name is Charles Rowe. I'm 60, and for the last 20 years, I had been the operations manager at Harper Machinery in Indianapolis, Indiana. I wasn't the kind of man to make speeches or command attention in meetings. I was simply the steady hand that kept the company's gears turning. A company that manufactured industrial equipment for half the factories in the Midwest. With a sarcastic smile, I nodded once and walked out of Sophia's office. No drama, no threats, no arguments. I just cleared out my desk methodically while the younger staff looked away. Some of them had been hired as teenagers and were now men and women with families, and I'd personally trained every single one of them. Yet, no one said a word as I packed almost 2 decades of my life into a cardboard box. 40-3 years ago. Thomas had built the company with his own hands, starting with a single lathe in his garage. Through pure grit and a reputation for reliable machinery, he built it into a $40 million business. When his health started to fail, he'd handpicked me to run operations. "You're the only one I trust not to cut corners," he had told me. Now, his 29-year-old daughter, Sophia, with a business degree and 2 years spent in Miami, had decided the company needed a fresh perspective and modernization. This was just a coded way of saying she wanted to get rid of anyone who remembered how things were done before spreadsheets replaced common sense. As I walked to my truck carrying that pathetic box of personal items, I felt a strange calm. What Sophia didn't know, what she hadn't even bothered to check, was that my employment contract had a very specific clause. Stephen himself had insisted on it to keep competitors from poaching me. It was a severance penalty equal to 2 full years' salary if I was terminated without cause. I put the box on the passenger seat and sat there for a minute, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I could see the production floor. Equipment I'd personally maintained, systems I'd implemented, people I'd hired. They were all about to learn what happens when institutional knowledge walks out the door. I didn't slam the door, nor did I screech out of the parking lot. I just turned the key, put the truck in drive, and headed home to call Harold Preston, a lawyer friend who'd been waiting for an excuse to take on a corporate case as straightforward as this. I'd never been the flashy type. I was married for 29 years to my wife, Linda, before cancer took her 4 years ago. I raised 2 kids who are both doing well, my son in Denver with an engineering firm, and my daughter teaching 3rd grade in Cleveland. My life had been built around consistency and reliability. The same approach I brought to Harper Machinery. Thomas was more than just a boss to me. In many ways, he was the father figure I never had. My own dad had disappeared when I was 13, leaving my mother to raise 3 boys on a secretary's salary. Stephen took a chance on me when I was 41, coming off a layoff from a dying automotive plant with nothing but hands-on experience and a community college degree in mechanical engineering. "Credentials don't build machines," Stephen said during my interview. "Men with sense and skill do." He promoted me to operations manager within 2 years. Stephen and I weren't the types to go fishing together or hit the bar after work, but there was a respect between us that went beyond the workplace. When Linda got sick, he was the one who rearranged my schedule without me even asking, ensuring I could take her to every treatment. "Family first, Charles, always," he said. The first warning sign came about a year ago when Sophia started showing up at meetings, fresh out of business school, carrying a leather portfolio and a cloud of expensive perfume. She would talk about synergy and market disruption. Sometimes, I'd catch Stephen wincing at her suggestions, proposals that would have gutted our quality control or outsourced components we'd always made in-house. He never contradicted her publicly though. He'd just quietly fix things afterward. "She needs to learn, Charles," he told me one afternoon, leaning against my office doorframe. "Some lessons can't come from books." The second warning came 3 months ago when Stephen announced his retirement. He said it was heart problems, though I suspected it was more about succumbing to Sophia's pressure. He looked defeated when he handed me the updated organization chart with Sophia's name at the top. I made her promise to keep the core team intact, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. The experience you all bring is what makes this place work. I just nodded, but something in my gut tightened. The way Stephen wouldn't look me in the eye felt like he knew what was coming, but couldn't bring himself to say it. The morning after I was terminated, I was sitting at my kitchen table, reviewing my employment contract with Harold when my phone rang. Stephen's name lit up the screen. I almost didn't answer it. Almost, but 19 years of respect doesn't vanish overnight. Charles, his voice sounded strained. What the hell happened yesterday? Ask your daughter, I said, keeping my tone neutral, not angry, just stating facts. I did, he paused, searching for words. She said you were resistant to the new direction. Said you were undermining her authority with the floor team. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. Stephen knew me better than that. He knew I would never undermine anyone. You're going to file, aren't you? He finally asked. Already have, I replied. Harold Preston is handling it. Stephen exhaled heavily. I told her to look at the contracts. Told her before I stepped down that there were protections in place. Another pause. She said she cleaned house yesterday. You, Thomas, Anthony, ... anyone over 50. My jaw tightened. Thomas had been our head of engineering for 12 years. Anthony ran the quality control lab like it was her personal kingdom. Both of them were irreplaceable in their own ways. Is that the direction you wanted, Stephen? Clearing out everyone who built the place with you? You know it's not, he said, his voice tired. But I gave her control. It's hers to run now. I heard voices in the background on his end, one of them distinctly Sophia sharp and demanding. I've got to go, Stephen said quickly. The call ended abruptly. I set the phone down and stared at my contract spread across the table. Section 12, Paragraph 3. In the event of termination without documented cause as defined in Appendix C, employees shall be entitled to severance compensation equal to 24 months of current salary. Harold had highlighted it in yellow. It's airtight, he'd told me earlier. They'll either pay, or we'll take them to court, where we'll win, and they'll pay my fees, too. I walked to the window, overlooking my backyard. The maple tree Linda and I had planted when we first moved in 25 years ago now towered over the property. We had nurtured it through 2 lightning strikes and a disease that nearly killed it. Patching it up and giving it what it needed to thrive. Something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about value, about recognizing what experience brings to the table, and about respecting the foundation others built before you decide to renovate the house. I picked up my phone and called Thomas, then Anthony. By noon, I had spoken with every veteran employee Sophia had fired. Some were shell-shocked, others were furious. All of them were worried about their futures. Take a breath, I told each of them. Check your contracts. Call Harold. Then I made one more call to Douglas Lisa, the owner of Precision Parts across town, a man who had been trying to hire me away from Harper for years. Still interested in that conversation, I asked him. 3 days after being fired, I sat across from Sophia and Harper, Machinery's corporate attorney, in a downtown office. Harold Preston was beside me, his weathered briefcase open. My contract, prominently displayed. This is ridiculous, Sophia said, not even looking at the document. We're implementing a new direction. That's cause enough. Harold, 67, with the patient demeanor of a man who had seen every corporate trick, simply pointed to the highlighted clause. Termination without cause, as defined in Appendix C, requires severance equal to 24 months' salary. Approximately $320,000 in Mr. Rowe's case. The corporate lawyer, a young guy named Justin, who looked fresh out of law school, scanned the contract. With growing discomfort, Miss Harper, the definition of cause here is quite specific. Performance issues, ethical violations, criminal acts. He was resistant to change, Sophia interrupted, crossing her arms. That's insubordination. Where's the documentation? Harold asked. Written warnings. Performance improvement plans. Because Appendix C requires a documented pattern, not a single instance. Justin flipped through a thin folder in front of him. Finding nothing, Sophia's face tightened. Fine, so we pay him a few months severance and move on. 24 months, Harold corrected. As stipulated. That's ridiculous, she snapped. We'll offer 6 months. Take it or leave it. I stayed silent, watching her. In that moment, she reminded me of her father, the same stubborn set to her jaw. But Stephen's stubbornness had always been in service of building something. While hers seemed aimed at tearing down Dot, Harold closed his briefcase. Then we'll proceed with legal action. Discovery should be interesting, especially regarding the simultaneous termination of multiple employees over 50. Justin's eyes widened slightly. He leaned toward Sophia and whispered something urgent. She brushed him off. Before you make threats, Sophia said to me, ignoring Harold completely, you should know, we're prepared to fight this. You'll be tied up in court for years, she added. Good luck finding another position at your age. That's when her father appeared in the doorway. I hadn't seen Stephen since his retirement party. He looked thinner and paler, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Sophia, he said quietly. A word. We're in the middle of something, Dad. Now, he said, not as a request. They stepped outside through the glass wall of the conference room. I could see them arguing. Stephen gestured emphatically as Sophia's posture grew more defensive. When they returned, Sophia wouldn't look at me. Justin. Stephen said, prepare the severance agreement as written in the contract. Dad, Sophia started. Not now. Stephen turned to me. I apologize, Charles, this isn't how I wanted things to end. I nodded once. Nothing more needed to be said between us. As Harold and I stood to leave, Sophia stepped in front of me. This isn't over. I'll be reviewing all vendor relationships. Any company that hires you can forget about doing business with Harper. Stephen paled at her words, but said nothing. I just nodded again, thinking about my conversation with Douglas Lisa the day before, about the partnership offer he'd made, and about the niche market Harper had been ignoring for years that Precision Parts was poised to enter. You're right about one thing, I told her. It isn't over. The severance payment hit my account a week later, $420,000 minus taxes. More money than I'd ever seen at once. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt hollow. Money wasn't the point, and neither was revenge. Really, it was about something deeper. That same afternoon, I met Thomas Baldwin, our former head of engineering. At a diner halfway between our homes. The place was nearly empty at 3:30 in the afternoon, with just a couple of truckers at the counter, and us in a back booth. Harold got me a year's severance, he said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. Not as good as your deal, but better than nothing. They want you to sign an NDA, Thomas nodded. Can't talk about proprietary processes or business practices for 5 years. He gave a bitter laugh. 40 years in engineering, and suddenly, I can't talk about my own work. You signing it? Don't see much choice. Got a granddaughter starting college next year. I pushed a business card across the table. Douglas Lisa, Precision Parts. He's looking for a consultant, I said. Someone who understands precision hydraulics. No NDA required. Thomas stared at the card. Harper would sue me if I took this. Not if you're just advising on general industry standards. Nothing proprietary about that. He pocketed the card slowly. What's going on, Charles? This isn't like you, stirring the pot. I hadn't told anyone about my arrangement with Douglas yet, but Thomas deserved to know. We had worked side by side for over a decade. I'm partnering with Precision, I said quietly. Douglas is bringing me in to head up a new division, specialized hydraulic components. The small batch, high-margin stuff Sophia thinks is a waste of time. Thomas's eyebrows shot up. The custom work, Stephen always said that was Harper's future, and now Sophia's killing it to focus on mass production. Thinks she can compete with overseas manufacturers on price. She can't, Thomas said flatly. Not with our labor costs. I know. So does Stephen. Thomas leaned forward. Is that why you're telling me this? You think Stephen is involved somehow? Shook my head. No, but I had lunch with Anthony yesterday. She said Sophia's been liquidating equipment. The specialized machinery Stephen bought last year for the custom work. She's already sold half of it. That's over $2 million in equipment, Thomas said, his eyes wide. At auction prices, she probably got 30 cents on the dollar. Thomas sat back, understanding dawning on his face. She's stripping the company, converting assets to cash. I nodded. And guess who's been buying property in Miami? Jesus. Thomas ran a hand over his face. Does Stephen know? I don't think so. He built that company for legacy, not liquidation. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing what this meant, not just for us, but for the 100+ employees still at Harper and for Stephen's life's work. What are you going to do? Thomas finally asked. Build something better, I said simply. Something that respects both the past and the future, with Douglas Lisa. Thomas sounded skeptical. Douglas is just an investor. He's 2 years from retirement. Himself, he wants to back people who know what they're doing, then step aside. And, let me guess, you need an engineer who understands hydraulics. I smiled for the first time in weeks. The position's yours if you want it, once your NDA is limited to actually proprietary information, not general knowledge. Thomas studied me. This isn't just business for you, is it? It's personal. It's about value, I said. About building something that lasts. That's all I've ever wanted to do. 2 months after my firing, I sat in Douglas Lisa's office reviewing architectural plans for the new facility. The converted warehouse on the east side of Indianapolis would house Cornerstone Precision, our new venture specializing in custom hydraulic components. The name had been Thomas's idea. Built from the corners up, he had said. That's how you make something that lasts. Douglas, a barrel-chested man with a full white beard and perpetually rolled-up sleeves, spread the supplier contracts across his desk. Machine shops confirmed, he said. They can deliver the first 5 units by next month, and the CNC programmer starts Monday. Douglas gave me a knowing look. Former Harper employee. Said you recommended us. I nodded. Jason Wright had been at Harper for 6 years, brilliant with computer modeling, and criminally underpaid. Sophia had cut his department's budget by 30% while doubling her own salary. He'd quit 2 weeks ago. How many does that make now? Douglas asked. 7, I replied. All top performers. Douglas whistled low. Harper's losing talent fast. People. Follow good leadership, I said. Sophia's not providing it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Anthony, still working in Harper's lab. With her retirement 3 years away, she couldn't afford to leave, but she could certainly keep her eyes open. The message contained a photo of an internal memo, production delays, quality control issues, 3 major clients threatening to pull contracts over missed deadlines. I showed it to Douglas, who adjusted his reading glasses to see better. Just as we predicted, he said. The brain drain's affecting output already. I pocketed my phone, feeling no satisfaction in the news. Harper employed families I had known for years, people with mortgages, kids in college, and parents in nursing homes. Their suffering wasn't my goal. We should reach out to Midwest Manufacturing, I said, referring to one of Harper's biggest clients. Let them know we'll be operational in 60 days. Douglas nodded, making a note. Already scheduled a meeting for next week. Their purchasing manager is eager to talk. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the warehouse floor below. Workers were installing the first pieces of equipment, the bones of something new, something built on respect for both experience and innovation. My phone rang. Thomas's name was on the screen. I should take this, I told Douglas, who nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Stephen, I answered. Charles. His voice sounded tired and defeated. We need to talk. I'm listening. Heavy sigh. I know what you're doing. The new company, the Harper employees you're hiring away, ... Double quotes. I said nothing. It wasn't illegal, wasn't even unethical, just business. I'm not calling to ask you to stop, Stephen continued. I'm calling to ask for your help. That caught me off guard. What kind of help? The kind that might save what's left of my company? He paused. Sophia's been selling off assets, cutting corners on quality. The board's concerned. So am I. Why tell me this? Because you're the only one who knows every part of the operation. The only one who might see a path forward. Another pause. And because I should have listened to you months ago when you warned me she wasn't ready. I closed my eyes and thought about all those years working alongside Stephen, building something we were both proud of. Something that employed hundreds of people who trusted us to make good decisions. What exactly are you asking, Stephen? Come to my house tonight. 7. Bring Thomas if he's willing. The board wants to meet to discuss options. Options? Yes, Stephen's voice strengthened slightly, including a change in leadership. I looked down at the warehouse floor again, at our small but growing operation, at the future I'd been building out of the ashes of betrayal. I'll be there, I said finally, but I'm not promising anything. Fair enough. Relief was evident in his voice. And Charles? Yes, thank you for still taking my calls. 6 months after being fired, I stood in the back of Harper Machinery's main conference room. The quarterly all-hands meeting had just been called to order with Sophia at the head of the table, flanked by her new executive team, most under 35, all looking nervous. I wasn't supposed to speak until the end. That had been the agreement with the board. Let Sophia present her quarterly results first and give her the chance to explain the 38% drop in revenue, the lost contracts, and the quality control failures. She was halfway through a presentation blaming market conditions and legacy inefficiencies when she noticed me. What is he doing here? She demanded, pointing in my direction. Stephen, sitting quietly among the board members, nodded to the chairman, who stood. Sophia, the chairman said, the board has reached a decision regarding the company's leadership. Her face went white. Charles, the chairman continued, turning to me. Would you like to explain the new arrangement? I stepped forward, holding a folder, the same one Harold had prepared for my severance 6 months earlier, but with very different contents now. Harper Machinery is merging with Cornerstone Precision, I said, my voice steady. The board has approved the acquisition agreement this morning. Sophia laughed sharply. This is absurd. I'm the majority shareholder. No, Stephen said, standing slowly. You hold 20%. I maintained 51%, which I've now voted in favor of the merger. I slid the folder across the table to her. Cornerstone will absorb Harper's custom hydraulics division. The rest will continue under new leadership. My leadership, Thomas said, stepping in from the doorway. Sophia flipped through the documents, her hands shaking. This is ... This is business, I finished for her. Nothing personal. A year after the merger, I stood in the expanded production facility that now housed both Cornerstone Precision and Harper Custom Hydraulics. Workers moved efficiently between stations. The rhythm of the machinery creating a symphony of productivity I'd missed during my months away. Stephen joined me on the observation platform. Leaning heavily on his cane, his health hadn't improved, but his spirit had watching the company thrive again had been the best medicine. Quarterly numbers came in, he said, handing me a report. Best in 5 years. I nodded, scanning the figures. Profit margins were up. Employee retention had stabilized. 3 new patents were filed. Sophia called yesterday, Stephen said quietly. From Miami, I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. After the merger, she had taken her settlement and disappeared, with no goodbyes. No apologies. She's starting a consulting firm, he continued. Asked if I'd invest. Will you? Stephen shook his head. Told her to come back to Indianapolis first, learn the business from the ground up, the way I did, the way you did, and she hung up. He smiled sadly. But she called back this morning, asked if the offer still stood. Below us, I watched Jason, training to new programmers on our latest system. Anthony, in her lab coat, inspected components with her characteristic precision. Thomas was at a workstation, sketching a design modification by hand before transferring it to the computer. Experience and innovation were working side by side, not in conflict, and not one replacing the other, but building something stronger. Together, Stephen said, when I wrote that severance clause in your contract, I never imagined how it would turn out. I smiled. Neither did I. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the company we'd both helped build continue to grow. Some lessons are expensive, but the ones that stick, the ones that change how we see the world, are always worth the price.